Recently, a former adjudicator with the Landlord and Tenant Board is suing the Ontario government and his former supervisor for wrongful dismissal, as he's claimed that his judicial independence was undermined by a combination of a toxic workplace and micromanaging. This morning, we're going to be speaking with Kayla Andrade. She's part of Ontario Landlords Watch. Hi, Kayla. How are you?
Hi, Devel. How are you today?
Good, thanks. Thank you so much for joining us. This is great.
Oh, I'm glad to be here.
Awesome. So does any of the dysfunction in this case with the Landlord-Tenant Board surprise you?
No, it's actually, it feels like it's the final straw in this hat. Because we've had a lot of people yelling from the rooftops for many, many years. And just recently, we just had a paralegal come out publicly about their disappointment. So it's nice to see that we do have an insider now coming out and talking about it. And I bet you there's more, because we did see a lot of people resigning from the Landlord and Tenant Board. We just don't know why. And
so I was about to say, what are some of the things that you see that they are complaining about?
The adjudicators are the paralegals or the landlords. Many people.
Well, I know the landlords, and we're going to get to that. I would say, I know the landlords, and we're going to get to that. But I'm curious, what are the paralegals and the adjudicators complaining about?
They believe that the adjudicators that are hired that shouldn't be there. They talk about them being unqualified. They talk about how they are taking their personal agendas and bringing it into their orders. And landlords see that. That's why when we have a hearing, we look at the adjudicator that we get that day, and we start to see their background and how they were appointed.
Jeez. Yeah, that's not very good for landlords at all. Now, I see that your organization has created a petition on change.org to call for the resignation of Doug Dowie, the Attorney General of Ontario. Why did you feel that you guys needed to take that step?
I get a lot of calls from landlords who are struggling, and there was a couple that were trying to move into their rental unit due to financial reasons. So they sold their home. And when they went to the Landlord and Tenant Board, they had served their tenant in July. They had their hearing in November. And in December, they had an order from the adjudicator giving the tenants an additional 6 months to live in the unit. And the adjudicator told the landlords that they are in a better position to be renting versus the tenant that was inside of their rental. That was what it really inspired me to call on for his resignation, because we've tried to work with the Attorney General's office, the Minister of Housing. We've obviously have roped in all of our local elected officials, and nothing has been done yet. So we're starting to see that this is now a leadership issue, and this is why we want to have some fresh eyes, because we can't be really taking the same mindset that created the problem and expecting that mindset to create the solution to the dysfunctional operations at the Landlord and Tenant Board.
Yeah, it makes a lot of sense. In fact, I've had a similar case last year. I sold a house, and my clients live in the main part of the house, but they have a basement tenant. And of course, we sold it. We gave her the requisite notice. And then she said, I come with the house. I'm not leaving. So then we actually had to sign a mutual release with the buyers who'd purchased the house to allow them to, get out of the deal. And then we had a landlord-tenant board hearing. And, we had booked the case essentially based on the fact that a buyer wanted to move into the house. You're only going to spend, you're only spending over $1 million in a house. Why would you want to live in it, right?
No, all rental.
Yeah. And so essentially they made my clients come back again. So they've got another hearing in March, because essentially they said, okay, yeah, but now you don't have a buyer. So, that's not a good enough reason. So now they have to file under another reason that, they plan on living there. But it's kind of crazy that, someone who lives in your basement is holding you hostage. And I know there's so many stories like this. It's just nuts.
There is a lot of stories, quite a few actually, and we understand that tenants are also feeling the impact of the Landlord and Tenant Board not operating the way it should, because it's supposed to be a tribunal system. It shouldn't be as complicated as it is, and it's not in other parts of the country. So we would like to see, Ontario to follow other jurisdictions besides BC and start to bring that fairness and timely access to justice to both parties, because what right now the landlords are leaving our industry because because of the Landlord and Tenant Board being as dysfunctional as it is, it's not providing them justice to tenants who abuse it, but it's also not providing the justice to tenants who find themselves dealing with a bad actor landlord. So there is going to be a lot of changes that are needing to happen, reforms, but we just hope that they do these changes in hopes of making things better, not worry of what it's going to look like on certain level of government. And I think that's what they're doing, is bringing the housing crisis and the political landscape together. Yep. And they're afraid to do what's necessary, afraid of votes.
Yeah, no, you're absolutely right. You know, the government doesn't want to stand up for landlords because then they'll be seen bad in the eyes of tenants. But you're right, the system isn't working for either party. I mean, I guess in my opinion, I feel like it just needs to be scrapped. We need to start fresh and come up with some other ideas that work for both parties. What are your thoughts on how do we fix this?
I think it's about their process. You know, I think there's a lot of situations like N12 applications for personal use. Why are we having a hearing when tenants have up to 2 years to bring a landlord back to the Landlord and Tenant Board in bad faith? So the rules are already there to protect the tenants. Why are we paying to have adjudicators at $110,000 salary to handle simple transactions of someone just trying to move into their house or the property has been sold? But we do have to look at the bigger problem here at the Landlord and Tenant Board, and that's going to be non-payment of rent. And we know that there is government agencies out there that help people in hardship situations, which why aren't we telling the tenants about this before we even have to file? So I think a lot of between government programs, we don't even need to be having full hearings to deal with non-payment of rent. We just need to make sure that tenants have access to the funds to keep them housed through these troubling times. Yeah. So we do have a lot of things or applications at the Landlord and Tenant Board doesn't need to be there. And this is where we need to revamp that reform of what the adjudicators are supposed to be doing and having a system that's more streamlined, and then a system that does need some intervention with a third party that seems to be very impartial and can look at both stories. Yeah. But unfortunately, right now at the Landlord and Tenant Board, we're not seeing that. We are seeing a lot of adjudicators that have that past job experience, either as legal aid, as a social justice tribunal, and they're bringing that past experience into their judgments, and they're not even being consistent with their own rules and procedures.
Yeah, no, absolutely. And I mean, I think we also need sort of a best practices for both parties, right? So best practices for tenants, but best practices for landlords as well too, because, you know, we do have to realize that, you know, both parties need to be treated properly. And so, you know, we're not trying to make things one-sided. We're just trying to make things more fair. Because ultimately, if they aren't fair, so many landlords will get out of the business, which many of them have over the last couple of years, especially because the interest rates have been so high. And so if more and more landlords get out of the business, then there's going to be fewer and fewer places for people to rent. So, you know, the landlords are a very important part of this equation that we need to think about. Kayla, thank you so much for joining me this morning. It's been great chatting with you.
Thank you so much. Have a great day, and thank you again for bringing this story to light.
No problem. Thanks a lot, Kayla.
Take care.
That was Kayla Andrade from the Ontario Landlords Watch. We're talking about landlord-tenant issues, and they have a petition on change.org calling for the resignation of Doug Dowie as the Attorney General of Ontario to get the Landlord-Tenant Board fixed and make things much better for everybody, all parties.